I believe the principle for me for leadership is I need to stay ahead of my best athlete. If my best athlete is throwing 50 feet, I need to stay as though I can coach a 55-footer. If my best athlete's throwing 55 feet, internally I have to be able to get that athlete to throw 60 feet, and I've got to know what it needs, what we have in place to get that individual to throw 60 feet. And we've got to document it, we've got to write it down, and we've got to be clear, and we've got to be ahead of our best athlete. Keys to a championship system here, and the one thing I want to talk, I almost think this is more of like a coaching coaches, and the reason being is last year I did one of these state clinics, a state convention out west further, and the whole day, okay, this is all I heard. I heard kids are entitled, kids are lazy, kids aren't motivated, kids are soft. That's all I heard the whole day. Everything was about the kids, the kids, the kids. And so we got to the end of the presentation, like this is the third one of the day, and I'm starting the presentation, and it was a room twice the size of this. And I was standing there, and I noticed some people coming in with booze, beer and shit, right? And I'm like, dude, I'm all for drinking, and I'm all for having a good time. But if you're gonna blame kids, you better freaking be here to listen. And if you're going to say kids are entitled, then you better be here to listen and to pay attention and to take notes and to get better yourself. And that was one thing. So I'm taking this approach a little bit differently on this specific speech because it was something that drove me absolutely insane, was that if we are going to blame kids for being entitled, and don't get me wrong, do I think that sometimes? For sure. Do I think some people are lazy? For sure. Do I think some people struggle with motivation and maybe they're a little soft and they could do a couple extra sets of back squats for sets of 10? Yes, absolutely. But at the end of the day, all of this stuff has to come back on us, okay? And so what I'm going to go with this is that I sat down and I think through coaching through 5 big principles. I want to cover the 5 principles that you guys could use. And I like to think about these principles as like my sort of like book of my guideline that I use internally. Like, what am I doing with each of these specific principles? What are the standards that I use as a coach myself and reflection on myself? And then how can we implement these things long term? And so later on, once we get towards the end of the presentation, I will have very specific stuff that we sort of talked about this morning with drills, how to lay out a week, lifting, exercises, stuff like that. I just wanted to talk about that. Really did sort of piss me off last year. Now, what I would think about here is that I think all of us as coaches, I think we have to, and I'm stealing this from Curt Cignetti, and who sadly beat Penn State on the last play of the game. As terrible a season that Penn State had, I was hoping that they would beat Cignetti, but they didn't do it. I'm stealing this from him where he talked about taking a risk on himself and leaving Alabama and going to IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. If you've ever been there, you know what type of risk that is. And I related this back to throwing because I think for us as coaches, we have to take risks on ourselves. We have to take a risk and look at ourselves a little bit deeper as coaches, because I believe 100% it's a privilege for us to be coaching. It's a privilege for us to have kids standing there listening to us. It's a privilege for us to be able to impact them, and we've got to take that with take it seriously. I think that oftentimes we are sort of looked at as like, oh, just go in the corner and eat Rice Krispie treats and you're going to be a thrower. And it's like, no, I want to change this. And so I think ultimately for me personally, I got an email from Alex Rose here in 2015, fall of 2015, and he said, hey, I need a coach. Can you coach me? And at the time, I hadn't coached really anybody outside of high school kids. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I can coach this kid. I can coach him, and I can get him to the Olympics. And I remember writing down, if he doesn't throw far, it is my fault. If my kids don't throw 60 feet, it is my fault. If my girls don't throw 50 feet, it is a reflection of me. It is not a reflection of them. It is a reflection of me. And I think that's an approach that when you take that risk and you say it out loud and you put it on yourself, now you have to elevate yourself because you're going to be checking on a regular basis. Are you actually upholding yourself to a standard, or are you just checking a box? Are you just showing up and checking the box? And so taking that risk on Alex's PR went from 57 meters to 71.48. Long story short, this was the first program I ever wrote him on a white, on a composition paper. This past year, he got third at the World Championships, and it was based off of these principles. Really come back to this long journey that he and I have had together. And I think when we think as coaches, taking control of every single situation is absolutely vital. And taking control of every single practice is vital. Taking control of every single variable is vital. And we can do it even at the middle school level. It can happen. And so that's the whole pitch that I'm going to put together here. And the whole point here is the principle framework. Okay, so we got principles, which is abide by what is our preparation principle. Then the standard, which is hold yourself to this degree. And then the action is, okay, this is how you have to actually prepare and implement it. And so the five big things here would be preparation, leadership, the competitive principle, and then throwing and lifting, right? Like those are being able to have those key principles and being able to identify those key principles and then tell your athletes these key principles so that everyone has the same level of expectations on how things are going to go about. Now, I want to get right into this because principle 1 is about preparation, okay? How are you going to prepare, okay? We have to be intentional with our preparation. We have to think through every single scenario, and we have to think about every single kid and what every single kid is going to be dealing with at practice, as they go to a competition. What are they going to be thinking about when they see another kid warm up and he's throwing big, huge bombs? How are they going to be handling those different situations? We have to prepare with all of those different aspects in mind. So we've got to know the point for the week, know the point for the season, know the goals on a weekly basis, and what are the technical focus for every single kid. It's not that hard. It's not, okay? So we've got to have daily and weekly actions that guide the season. So that's principle 1 is going to be preparation. This might be an action of principle 1, which is preparation. This could be like, hey, this is how our week is laid out, okay? Guys, I'm going to hold myself to this degree. I'm going to plan our throwing, our lifting, what we're doing with our specific drills, how we're approaching every single day of the week from day 1 through day 7. And then in the season, this day turns into, competition. Maybe we change this into watch videos. Whatever it might be, every single athlete gets an example of what this looks like every single week. So that's the action out of preparation. It really just comes back to, in this case, is like knowing what the goal is for that specific week, laying that out ahead of time and communicating it as clearly as possible. Now, principle 2 goes into leadership. Okay, so I believe the principle for me for leadership is I need to stay ahead of my best athlete. Okay, so what does that mean? It means if my best athlete is throwing 50 feet, I need to stay as though I could coach a 55-footer. If my best athlete's throwing 55 feet, internally I have to be able to get that athlete to throw 60 feet, and I've got to know what it needs, what we have in place to get that individual to throw 60 feet. If I have a girl throwing 30 feet and she's my best girl, I got to get her to 35, and I have to have that in my head. How are we going to get her to 35? And we've got to document it, we've got to write it down, and we've got to be clear, and we've got to be ahead of our best athlete. And that requires us to learn and to push ourselves to talk to other coaches and to be here on a Friday, and you guys are doing a great job with this. So the standard is confidence starts with the coach. We've got to have a consistent and focused guidance that is very clear. Now, one thing here that I wanted to bring up is I was actually at Spire 3 weeks ago. And one part of leadership, I think, comes into knowing cues, knowing how the athlete is moving, and then knowing how to communicate with your athlete as well. And this is where sort of the actions come into play. I was standing there and I was listening to a coach talk to their thrower. And the coach said, let's just pretend this, put your right down earlier and you'll throw farther. So the girl took a throw and the coach said, oh, good job. And then they read the mark and he was like, well, you're not putting your right foot down earlier. Third throw, it happens again. Put your right foot, she throws. And he's like, yeah, you put your right foot down earlier. They read the mark, and then he was like, no, you didn't put your right foot down earlier. And she actually called the coach out, like, yo, you're saying I'm doing this, but then as soon as they read the mark, you're changing your mind. And I think like that is a toxic situation where it's like, instead of being mad at the individual that the mark didn't go where you want it to go, just focus on the cue, not the distance. The distance will be there. It will happen. Don't try and like back out of the cue that you're saying just because the distance isn't there. Sometimes they might not be on, and I think it's important that in leadership, we have a positive way of communicating these things, and we're actually able to hold that dialogue in an intense environment. So the actions here now would be, how much film and review are we going to do on a weekly basis? Okay, how many technical analysis are you going to do of your athlete? Or how many technical analysis might you ask your athlete to do? How many times are you going to talk about a technical model? Are you keeping a cues log or a lifting log? Are you having your athlete keep a cues log? One common question that I get is, well, what am I supposed to do when I have 20 middle school kids in a room? Guess what? Tell them to have a notebook. Ask the school to have a notebook. Ask their parents to have a notebook, okay? Get some buy-in from people up top, from your athletic director, from your parents. Say, I want them to bring a notebook to practice. Guess what one group can do, and I mentioned this earlier, is to write down their cues and to write down their drills and to write down what they're trying to achieve technically. It sounds crazy, but the best people do it. Get them to do it. Stop complaining about the kids and give them a reason. Give them a task and tell them why so they buy into what you're telling them to do. And it means like, yo, you got to push yourself to get out of your comfort zone and ask them to do some new things. And so, making sure that they're actually writing these things down and keeping track of how much protein did they have, what time did you go to bed? All these things matter. Now, learning. You guys, I think this is a great example. You guys are here, right? You're at a course, you're at a clinic, you're learning. And I would even urge you, try to change something on a yearly basis and try and pick one thing that you're going to learn this year that you're going to implement and change in your training to see if it works or not. And I think that can go a long way with leadership because then you're a bit more open-minded to progress in your system. Now, the third principle I think is key is having an actual competitive principle. And I think this is where like the rubber meets the road. We take the abstract stuff behind preparation, behind leadership, all those things like that. It's all happy, hoo-ha, fun to talk about. But this is actually where now we're going to take our prep, our leadership, and we're going to start to implement this into our kids and into our athletes so that they can compete with more confidence, okay? And I think that when we have very, very clear principles of confidence through aggressive execution, okay? So if we can consistently set up situations in training where we put pressure on kids, they learn how to handle that stress, okay? And you might see some kids some kids will handle that pressure differently. Some kids will thrive in that pressure. Some kids will crack in that pressure. Don't let a kid crack in pressure and then say, well, he's just soft. Like this kid just doesn't handle it. Help them get better at handling the pressure. Okay, because then they go into a competitive setting and they will know how to handle the stress. They will know how to handle what that pressure is. And it might take 1 to 2 years to happen. But if you're constantly thinking through that, what we can do with this competitive principle, that leads to some success. I think some of the real simple standards from a competitive standard or competitive idea is if we go into a competition, okay, remind the thrower that the standard is that each throw has its own history. Throw one happens, it's over. Move to the second throw. And that means if you PR on your first throw, you got to try and PR on throw number 2. You got to try and, PR, come back on throw number 3. Each throw has its own history. Move on, just like Signetti talks about, each play has its own history. You're moving to the next play. And I think that's a big factor here is that a lot of high school kids will beat themselves up if they have a bad first throw. And then you're behind the 8 ball the entire time. If you go into a competition and you have this as a standard, each throw has its own history. Okay, now the next throw 2, it's a new throw. It's the same cues, it's the same movement pattern, just got to execute a little bit smoother, do these things a little bit more dialed in, but we're not changing anything. And we have to approach the competition with a plan. Okay, this is like my biggest issue at the high school level is that, at Spire a couple weeks ago, I'm saying this top of mind because this is the most recent high school comp I went to. I was listening and it was, what should I do for a warm-up? What throws should I take? How many throws should I take for a warm-up? Should I do any half turns? Can I take a full throw and then go back and do a half turn? And there were all these questions going back and forth. To me, and as much as football drives me insane, do you think guys are, the quarterback goes into a Friday night game and they're like, hey coach, can I call the plays for a couple quarters? Like second quarter, can I do this? It's like, no, they go in with a plan. And if we approach throwing the exact same way, it's go in. This is the warm-ups. Okay, 60 minutes out, I want you to start loosening up. I want you to start walking around. I want you to go to the bathroom, make sure that you're fully hydrated. Maybe you have some electrolytes. Okay, 30 minutes out. I want you to start doing some dynamic stretching. I want you to do some skipping. Just go 5 to 10 minutes. You're doing some of your specific stretching. Okay, 20 minutes out, the circle's opening up. I want you to loosen up your hand. We're going to take 1 standing throw, 2 non-reverses, 1 full throw. You're going to be ready to freaking drop a bomb. First throw's 85%, 80 to 85%. Now that's the plan. Just doing something as simple as that and reflecting over that over and over and over again, now you have that competitive standard that turns into an action. And I think when we have that action is when you're going to have more confidence with your athletes in the actual competitive environment. And so 1 to 2 cues only. And I'm going to show you a paper that we use specifically with our group. 1 to 2 cues only, okay? And this would be a competitive action here. The first throw, 80%. 1 to 2 cues that are linked to 1 to 2 key drills, okay? So I talked about in the rotational presentation about this drill here. Get the kid on the side, if they're falling in out of the back of the circle, the drill is, hey, just do the balance drill where you balance on the left and then get off. Just do that on the side so now they're visualizing that in between throws, they can feel that. Don't ever raise your voice on a kid, unless they're being a punk, but don't raise your voice if they have a bad throw. It's a logical thing, okay, right? Hey, you just did this, make sure that you execute this, get over your left, put the right down earlier, make sure you're patient with the shoulders. Okay, don't turn your back on the kid ever. Don't turn your back no matter what. That's your 100% competitive action rule is you don't turn your back on the kid. You communicate as openly as possible. And then you have the full prep the day before, which is going to be based off something like this. Now I'll try and walk you guys through this. We'll have an athlete fill out the sheet, okay, so that they have to actually think through, okay, this is my name. This is the date of the competition. This is what we're going to be doing. This is the time I'm going to start my mobility, okay? Mobility would be what we do as warm-ups. Okay, if you have a distance runner as your head coach, you're probably going to be doing mobility for about an hour and a half before they throw for 90 minutes, so make sure that you talk to them about that. Warm-up throws. 1 stand. Let's say 1 to 2 non-reverse fulls. 1 full. Don't take this one if you don't have to. Competitive throws, 80%. Throw 2. If we get a mark on the first throw and it's good, throw 2. We're going to try and tag one and shut the competition down on throw number 2 to try and just reach a huge bomb. And you write it down. Get the athlete to visualize it, because when they start to write these things down, they start to believe they can do it. They start to think through, okay, I can do this on throw 1. I can do this on throw 2. What are your primary cues? Get weight on my left, get off. Get weight on my left, hold my shoulder in the middle. Whatever those 1 to 2 cues are. What's an emergency cue? This would be, you can't feel shit. The kid's in a comp and it's a disaster. Okay, you got an emergency cue in your back pocket. Like, okay, we got to focus on this now. We got to save something here. And the reason why we're talking about it with the athlete is that now they're prepared for everything. If they throw like crap, they know they have a backup plan. Okay, they also know they have all of the stuff around the time, and we even have on the back of this sheet is even what time are they waking up. Okay, what music are they listening to keep their heart rate down? What music are they listening to elevate their heart rate? Some people don't want to take caffeine. High school, or I would talk to parents and stuff about this, but we'll say what time to take caffeine? About 30 to 45 minutes before. Start taking caffeine. Some kids now, it's crazy, they're freaking ripping smelling salts and stuff. Parents ask me about that. I'm like, listen, I'd rather your kid be ripping smelling salts and taking caffeine than laying on the couch playing video games. Sorry, I know I probably shouldn't say it, but come on. Nutrition prior to competition. What are they eating ahead of time? And then guess what? When we do this at every single comp, and then we have the results of the comp, we can go back and say, okay, at this meet, you ate a banana and oatmeal and you PR'd. Well, at this meet, you went to freaking McDonald's and you had a Big Mac and you threw like crap. Now they can start to correlate things and they can see this accountability. Well, what are we going to do if there's a wet circle? What about if the implement's wet? What if it's a fast circle? You see kids changing their shoes. They've got 90 pairs of shoes with slow circle. We even put in here different types of things for wind, for discus. And then what are you going to have in your bag, okay? You got your wrist wrap, you got your tape, you got your chalk, you got your pre-workout. You have everything lined up that you're going to be ready to go. And I would even recommend in this case, they have their notebook that they write their cues in, they bring that in, and that's the first thing that they start to look at and they start to visualize. And that's when kids start to feel, their heart rate will go up immediately. Oh man, I'm getting close to competing. I'm getting close to dropping bombs and beating everybody. That's when it becomes not as much a pressure issue as it becomes much more a fun issue. I'm about to have fun. And this is a huge actionable item that I think everybody can take. Now, throwing principle. I think this is where, this does cover a lot of what we talked about this morning. Actually, you can see Yaime's left foot. This is what I was talking about this morning with the left foot blocking her off a little because she over-rotates so much with her right that I wanted to fix for the longest time, but now I've conceded. And the high point. You can see her high point here too. So, having technical clarity, okay, that leads to that aggressive execution. If my athlete and I are on the exact same page with technique and they've taken the rotational lecture I gave this morning and they've listened to it, they've talked to me about it over and over again, we're on the same page. We can execute things very easily. And that technique is what earns that athlete the right now to be as aggressive or as energetic as possible, to be as violent as possible in the circle. And I think that's a big aspect here is that once you have those throwing principles, and even just thinking as simple as this morning's lectures, your right goes around your left goes around your right goes around the left on the finish, leads to a lot of big consistency there. So the throwing standards, you've got to have a clear technical model, and then a throw becomes corrected with intent. A throw has a very specific cue. Okay, one thing, again, going back to Spire, I coached Tom Bajalat, he's at Akron. I made fun of him because he gave a cue, and I was like, what does that cue even mean? It was like, oh, your discus is being passive through this point. And I literally was like, I don't know what that means, Tom. How is the athlete, like, how is the discus being passive? Like, the athlete controls the discus. So there's no action for the discus. There's an action or a passiveness from the athlete. And now he did clarify what he meant, and they were on the same page. I still made fun of him. And I think that's the whole thing here, is that if we have someone who has a bad throw, okay, we have to, from a technical perspective, from the throwing principle, be able to take a step back and be like, yo, look, you did this, therefore I'm going to give you this cue to fix it. You know, in practice, when you do this, this is what I say. So those are some key throwing standards, throwing principles that we follow. And then what kind of throws day is it? Now this is from a big picture, and I'm going to go into some very specifics in training now. What kind of throws day is this? What's the goal? How many throws are we trying to get? What are the cues? What are the reps? Everything along those lines. So these are the types of throwing days, okay? And I mentioned this in the technique, but I wanted to go further into this so that I can provide more clarity. We have slam days. This is when everybody starts, blasting music, yelling, screaming, having fun. Range days. This is like the batting practice day. This is when everybody's just dialed in on movement. Okay, how well can you execute this? And this is I almost relate this to like the Zen practice, like getting high school boys especially, to shut up and just throw is a monumental task. And if you can do that and even say, hey, for the next 10 throws, no one's allowed to talk, that can be beneficial. And it's okay to have a consequence. Hey, no one's allowed to talk for 10 throws, and if somebody talks, we're going to do 20 air squats, whatever. Yes, it's okay to do that sometimes. Drill throw day, okay? In an entire session, we might go 50 to 100, 60 to 100 drills. Then you take 5 to 10 throws. I talked about this earlier, where we'll take 4 to 5 drills and then a throw, something along those lines. And then the mock meet. This would be another one where it's like, okay, we're going to warm up, and we're going to have this set up like an actual comp. We're going to paint the lines. We're going to have, you've got to sit. Okay, so one thing that a lot of kids struggle with is when they go to a state meet or they go to a regional meet, you have longer times to sit. Okay, you got to sit for 10 to 12 minutes between a throw. You go to Penn Relays in PA, you go to Penn Relays, and you might warm up, and then they introduce you, and you're sitting there for 15 minutes like, dude, are we going to freaking throw or what? So we got to practice those things. We have to practice sitting and waiting. Okay, what do? You visualize. Look at your notebook. Look at your drills. Look at your cues. Practice here. Go over on the side. Give them things to do. Their mind is racing, and you got to keep it dialed in on the process the whole time. Now, I did want to say, typically, earlier in the year, we'll do both of these, slam days and mock meets, but as we would get closer to big meets like districts or states, we would take out one of the slam days and add in maybe another extra mock meet. And then also, this is where we will dial in. The mock meets is when we're going to dial in the type of warm-up that we're doing. Some kids like to warm up with one big throw. Some kids like to warm up with easy throws. Now, this is how we would build a throwing session around slams. 3 to 6 standing throws, that's a bit much. I would say typically that would be 2 to 3 standing throws with fixed feet. Fixed feet meaning like you're here and you're just holding your feet down. Throw 7 to 13, now you're starting to set the tone and get building into something big. This is where the range day comes into play. This is where you can take the training session, the range day, and say, okay, throw 7 to 13, think about it as a range day. And then after you get out of those 13 throws, now it's like, okay, now we're in a comp warm-up. Now we want to really start to get after it. You can build up the intensity, focus on one cue, take note of any consistent errors. Look at those geographic checkpoints that we talked about this morning. What are they doing around their left? Is their left shoulder leading too much? Pay attention to those real key factors. Is their left foot opening enough? Once you see that, you want to give them a cue earlier up here. Okay, get up here with the first cue, and then hopefully that's the only cue you really got to provide, and that carries them through the rest of the session. And then once they have that one key focus, get them to just hammer. Does anybody have any questions on this? I'm going to go through each specific day. So the range day, this is literally, and I have in here the note that I mentioned this morning. When Krauser had mentioned, I want to try and throw 21 meters as easily as possible. I want to actually throw on the 21-meter line. I want to dial that in as clearly as possible. And this is where it's, you take a decent warm-up, you do your warm-up ahead of time, and now we're taking that throw 7 to 30, and we're counting the stands in there as well. And we're going, okay, 80 to 85, or another day, 82 to 88 with the PRs, and you got to hit them in there, and you got to put it in there, and we're focused on one to two cues. And this is another way to make it competitive, is that you can set up, we'll have kids on the side marking in the sense of no, it's past the range, or it's past the range. And then they can have a chalk mark, and they're tallying, Lincoln here, Landon here, who's getting more marks into their spot, into the range, so that they're not blasting out of it. And then the winner gets to pick whatever the punishment might be for the loser. So this would be an example of the range day. Now the drill day, 10 to 15 drills. There's a lot, and this is where I think you guys could going back to take ownership of this. Figure out what works for your setting and for your environment. Is it drill, 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 throw? Is it 30 drills over here while these people throw and those people do something with a band? Maybe there's 3 drill groups and 1 throws group, and you cycle through. It all comes down to how you set it up, but you've got to have, going back to principle 1, that preparation at the beginning of the week so that you know how to approach each day. And so the kids know. They come to practice and they have an expectation. Okay, when they have an expectation for what practice is going to be like, now they're coming in and they're excited. I'm going to get this done today, whatever that might be. And then this would be the mock meet. I do like having, we will have stadium noise. I think one thing, so in Pennsylvania we throw at Shippensburg, which is a D2 school, but they have a 6 stadium, and it can get very, very loud. The post-collegiate guys, if you're in a stadium, it is loud. They can't hear you most of the time, so you'll give signals. So we'll talk about stadium noise. We'll use music all the time, and oftentimes try and just have signals get over your left out, put your right down, things like that, you can mimic to help them. And then this is where the warm-up is in line with the timeline of the competition. So if it's a dual meet, I don't think that you need, if you have your best athletes, you don't need to really focus on this stuff for a dual meet. But if you have a kid that, let's say you have a kid that throws 34 feet and he needs to make counties by throwing 40, well, you can do these mock meets to get them ready for a big throw at a dual meet. So now the dual meet warm-up is going to be different from the invitational warm-up. And this is where altering the weather, is it supposed to rain? My biggest pet peeve is people crying about wet circles. It's dude, everybody's throwing in a wet circle. Deal with it. Stop complaining about it. Take ownership of the situation. I can throw far, not me personally because I suck, but I can throw far in a wet circle or a dry circle or maybe not an icy circle, but it doesn't matter. Change that environment. Athletes can call marks out on the circle or out on the sector, and then you just work through that as this mock meet builds up. Sometimes we will do bonus throws if there's a tight comp. Okay, and then this would be almost how a week of throwing might look. Drills, ranges, slams, and I like to give this where it's okay, so in our group we'll have a page on a Google Drive doc where they're filling in the total amount of throws that they're getting, and then we can see that lead to long-term progress. Okay, last principle, and then we'll get into some of the specifics here, is physical development. Okay, and I think this is where there's a lot of battles with football coaches at the high school level. It's How can we get football coaches to be more in tune with what we're trying to do? I'd make the argument you should try and get your high school throwers to be as explosive, as strong, and as mobile as possible. And when I say that, if you watch Joe Kovacs or Krauser, you watch the best discus throwers in the world, Alekna, when they're warming up and you see how mobile these athletes are, Jaime, Val Allman, you see the mobility positions that they're hitting. Those are the positions that we would want to see that would be beneficial for football players. And if we have an athlete like Eric Favors, who's an Olympian from Ireland, who can snatch 170 kilos, which is 373, and now let's pretend you have a high school kid who's a discus thrower that snatches 100 kilos, so 220. Most high school football players can't even clean 220. So now you can go to your high school coach and say, hey, listen, pretend Eric's still in high school. He's got a 35-inch vert. He's got a broad jump here, and he weighs 275. I think he'd be a good D tackle. Now let me do all the programming for strength and conditioning because your stuff's stuck in the 70s. Not that that's that bad. Some of the 70s stuff is good. But we want to be explosive, strong, and mobile. Okay, that's the principle. Our athletes, explosive, strong, mobile. How are we going to do it? We want big compound lifts, explosive movements. The most important aspect here is consistency. And I actually think you build up abs and arms, right? Like, so if we have, this is a 100% gender stereotype. If I have my high school boys doing bis and tris on Fridays, guess what? They're going to come back on Sunday or Monday, okay? Because they get a good pump, they leave, they're feeling good, they're feeling swole. They come back Sunday or Monday, now they're more consistent. Our high school girls, if their butt's sore or their abs are sore, they're going to come back Sunday or Monday. They want to come in, they feel good, they feel strong, and now that leads to more consistency. The more consistent your athletes are, and this in relation to lifting, the better they're going to be. If they can lift 2 to 3 days a week, every single week on a regular basis, they're going to be good. So that's like the standard there. Now the action item here is minimum when you're building a lift, 2 big movements, 1 explosive movement, 1 strength movement. We like to use plyometrics in the case of like a busy practice. If you've got a large group, plyometrics once a week, so some type of jumps. Use that in that setting where you got 30 kids. Hey, you guys are going to do drills. You guys are going to write down your cues. You guys are going to throw. You guys are going to do box jumps or hurdle hops or skips for distance, whatever it might be. But in this case with lifting, ideally you'd be able to lift for 30 to 40 minutes. 30 to 40 minutes is it, 3 days a week. Okay, we do like testing maxes. I think that's something that you would have to figure out based off of your scenario. But if you notice behind Loveland, and this is an 8th grader, she's 13, she's cleaned 220 pounds. She's an absolute freak of nature. But notice behind her, right, these banners, the Olympic banners, we've got record boards over here. High school kids love record boards. They love banners. If you have kids winning state titles, they better have a banner in your gym, and you better tell your AD, and you better go to the school board and bitch at the school board that they better put all the state champion banners up so that they can work towards that. Put a max out board in the weight room. Guess what? When you see all the max out numbers are all owned by throwers, guess who's going to listen to you now more? The football coach. Okay, so that's where we've got to take this concept and be like, how can we get these kids to want to train? You just dangle a carrot of motivation. Yes, they want to be put up on the wall. They want a banner. They want to work towards that. That's a dream to be on the max out record board. And you can make the record board top 3. You could have a yearly record board, and you can have a career like the span of the history of your school. So that way you have more opportunities for a kid to get up there. Have a men's record board, have a women's record board. Get 8th grade girls to be stronger than your high school boys, and guess what? Guess what happens? Yeah, all of this is possible. Now this is some of the lifts specifically that we'll use as guides, okay? So we've got shot disc boys, shot disc girls. Look, these numbers are inflated slightly. 1, because there are athletes on site. Basically it's a conglomerate of all of our maxes over the years. 2, I like making these a little higher because then Athletes have to train a little bit harder. They think about having to hit these numbers. But then also, when I say that, there's going to be some people that throw 50 feet. A high school girl might throw 50 feet and she's never benched 200 pounds. That happens. I get it. That does happen. But if she benches 200 pounds, it's probably going to be likely she's capable of throwing 50 feet. So think about these numbers in the sense of like, a lot of people will say these are too aggressive, or, well, I had this athlete do this. I'm not saying that they have to hit these numbers to throw those distances. These are just really cool guidelines that high school kids like to have to then work towards. Because now if you see this, you hit these, it's more likely you're going to get a banner, okay? You follow the way that we prep in the beginning of the week, and as a leader, I take on ownership of all of these things, and I follow those principles, and we get you in the gym to be more consistent. Now we can work towards that long-term goal. Now, I did want to share, this would be like how a session would be built out. I also just realized that some of these, so somebody might come in, let's say if you don't snatch, let's say you clean, or you don't snatch or clean, let's say you do trap bar jumps, okay, something like that. Dumbbell jumps, just hold dumbbells and jump. Just jump in place, do a box jump, okay? And then the second exercise, you do back squats. I was trying to see if I was swearing at all of this. I'm glad I didn't write anything bad. Except for maybe over here, I just realized. This would be like, this is a Nordic. We call them hamstring pulls. This is a Nordic, so this could be more so, let's say you could do a leg curl. You could do a dumbbell RDL here. But this would be, I like to do, if you see here, on the minute. That way, especially with our high school kids, they're not snatching or cleaning for an hour and a half. They have to get in, they get a minute rest. The back squat, we want their rest periods around 2 minutes to 2.5 minutes. The accessories, it's like, you got to get this done with about a minute and a half rest. So that's an example of a leg day. This is an athlete day, so this is where we would do plyometrics. I think one of the things that we've forgotten is how effective jump rope is. Take a jump rope out to the circle, have kids jump rope, have kids skip, have kids gallop, have kids do single leg jumps, get a hill at your high school, do single leg jumps up a hill. You do that for 3+ months and these kids turn into absolute savages. Okay, so those are some examples there of what we do on a plyometric day. This would be an upper body day. Now, I would say don't do behind the neck jerk. You don't have to do that, but you can do a push press, a dumbbell push press, a clap push up, and then you go into bench press. Some kids can't do pull-ups here, so maybe you do reverse flies, maybe you do band pull-aparts. Trap raise here would be like this, like upper body. And this is like upper back type stuff that we'll do. Okay, so the big thing here is I think it takes, principles. I look at the principles, those 5 principles, and I have standards that I try to hold ourselves to, and then we take those action items. And if I can follow those 5 principles and implement action to all of them, our kids are going to be freaking good. So I think step 1 is recognize you guys control everything. If you're complaining about your athletes, it's a reflection of you. I still will complain about my athletes, but then I've got to remember at the end of the day, if I'm bitching about them, it's likely comes back on me. It likely comes back to me or their parents sometimes, mainly their parents. Record everything. Get your kids to record everything. Get your kids to write down this stuff, okay? Prepare for practice and for the large group management. I got a presentation tomorrow more on large group management, but prepare for every single practice as though it means something, because it should. It shouldn't just be a check the box. It should be actually going to impact something. Use music, okay? Sorry, stop listening to the Doobie Brothers at practice. Kids don't like them. I had to stop playing Steely Dan a long time ago, and it hurt my soul because that's the shit I grew up on. But you know what? Sometimes Pop Smoke is better than Steely Dan, and I had to accept that. Because these kids are young, okay, right? Like, you got to try to relate to them. But you start playing their music, guess what? They think you're cooler. When they think you're cooler, they're going to listen to you. So do that. And that's where social media comes into play. I think post on social media, as long as you have approval from your athletic director, or if you have a high school social media thing on Facebook or whatever, use that. Have the results, have the banners, have the record boards, and then you have those max out slam sessions. Kids do enjoy accountability, and they do enjoy intensity. Okay? Contrary to what we all want to complain about, they like it. They do like being held accountable, maybe not from mom and dad, but from other people that they look up to. And that's you guys, and you guys are the ones that got to own this. Okay, so take that, and I hope this helps people out there. This is a 12-week coaches course that we offer on Throws U. But any questions around those principles and what it takes to be a great coach, really, is the whole goal here, is that I want you guys to walk away from this like you're getting that next 70-footer.
On your mock meet days, like in Ohio, you have to practice for the district meet, which can take all day because you got everybody.
Yep.
And then you have to organize to the regional, to the state. And all year long, they get in the mentality that the best throwers will throw last because they'll be already warmed up and ready to go. But that's not necessarily going to happen. So sometimes you have to, like I had Erica Goins, I made her be the first thrower, the first flight of it, as they would call the AYO. Mm-hmm. She just got pissed as hell. I said, listen to me, Erica, I'm your coach, it may happen.
Yeah.
So her junior year, the first time she got to the state meet, she was the first thrower.
Yeah, the first flight.
And she was, Coach, how'd you know?
Yeah.
I told you.
Well, and I would even do this where it's like, you take that example. What if you have somebody, let's say they do seed it. Okay, so the best throwers go last. Sorry. But let's say you have somebody in the first flight who pops off. You know, there's a lot of high school kids that will have 5 to 7 foot PRs. We had a girl that added 4.5 feet to her PR in 2 meets. And it's like, well, now let's say she's at States, she's in flight 1, and she throws 42 feet, and she makes the final, and she's top 3. Well, she has to be prepared at least one time. You've got to go, okay, you're going to throw, and then we're going to sit for 20 minutes. You got to wait, and then you got to come back. But what are you going to do? This all goes back to you go do your drills on the side, you follow your cues, you write your cues down, go to the bathroom, get some food in you. What did you eat? When we've done this in the past, now they're familiar with that situation. I think that's a good point.
You got to practice that too.
Yeah, you got to practice it at least once a week during the season.
It's like you don't sit underneath a tree and do nothing.
Yeah.
Stay out in the sun and work on your team.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And that's also where with the music stuff that we'll talk to them about. On Spotify and some of these apps now, you can find beats per minute songs that will lower your heart rate. There's a lot of research that once it gets past a certain beats per minute, that's when the adrenaline will be released more and their heart rate elevates. Like there's a lot of science out there now around weird stuff. And that can be used to your benefit. And in this case, if you have a kid sitting down, go listen to Beethoven and freaking block out your TikTok followers. Stop scrolling there and just do this. They might scroll on TikTok still a little bit, but. Anybody else have questions around this?
Do you prepare your more intense weight room days with your slam days?
Yes, on the same day. We will usually slam and then lift legs heavy. And we'll do that early and then we back up. So that's a good question because we'll go slam it, and if we go back to the screen in the beginning, this screen here, like you'll see the intensity there. Like we would go slam day, lift heavy, and then the next day would be like our range day. That's an easier day. So because we want at least 2 or 3 days for them to recover from the slam and the heavy lift. Now, I will say that these will flip. So some weeks the heavy lift will be on the upper body day. Like let's say they have a meet coming up that week. Let's say they have and the other thing you got to factor in is if it's a Tuesday, so we have dual meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So some kids, if they're not the best, we want to back off the slam day, but then we treat the dual meet as the slam day, and then we'll try and get them to lift hard. If we have somebody who's really good, we sort of train through those. So I think you have to play around with that based off of the level of the kid and what their goals are. But we try to set it up so early in the week they go hard, then they dial in their technique, and then end of the week they're back to feeling fresh and they're ready to go. Because that's sort of where that end of the week is an invitational. Fridays or Saturdays are our invitationals. We used to have 2 dual meets a week, but they've changed that now to Tuesday or Wednesday, and then that's it for us. Because they started doing more like tri-meets, basically. I don't know if that's different here. Yeah, I think that tri-meets are they're more fun anyway. Any other questions on this?
On lifting, there's some throwers I've had, if they do like a light speed rep the day of the meet, tend to throw farther than, just cutting off altogether.
Yeah.
And if you're away, you have to figure out a way, well, what can...
How do you do that? Yeah. Yep. I think that's where a med ball or a plyometric can help. I think women, in our experience, women tend to do very well with something like that too. They will feel way better and snappier the more tension they have, like going into a meet. Guys, I think it's almost hit or miss. It's like different. It's like some guys feel great, some guys get a little tired. And some guys, when they start lifting, they don't want to stop either. So that's a downfall. Is like, they come in, and we've even, I will say this, we've even been fortunate enough that, so where our gym is sort of like near residences. So like, we've had kids ride their bike to the gym and they lift in the morning at like 7 a.m. because they're psychos. One of them is actually sitting back there. And so he was Jason was an indoor state champ. He would actually come in and lift on days before he would go compete. So that's the other thing. It's like some kids want to really just train constantly, and you want them to keep coming in to train. Some kids you have to prod a little bit, but I think my whole message here is like, it's not on them. We are the ones guiding them. I mean, they still obviously have to have accountability. Yeah.
Is this pretty similar? Like would you say you kind of coach and prepare the same way for middle schoolers? Is it like the same program? You dial it back?
I would dial it back to the point where it's like with our middle schoolers, I'll say this. Some of our middle schoolers literally train like our top dogs, but again, I'm lucky in the sense that we are in a gym and they'll do that. My recommendation is I think you should at the earliest stage. In PA, Pennsylvania is a huge wrestling state, right? Like we wrestle all the time. We destroy Ohio State every time Penn State wrestles Ohio State. We're smacking them. I had to get that jab in there. Your football team's too good. And like to go off of this, the best wrestling coaches in our area will tell you this. Like, hey, our middle school is teaching the same system the whole way up. Now, they might only teach a collar tie to a double or a collar tie to a sweep, right? Like 2 or 3 offensive moves so that then when they get to high school, they can expand off the collar tie. And that's my argument for throwing, is that you do the same thing. Look, you're going to throw and you're going to lift. You might have a middle school kid that comes in and she throws and she just does, she learns the technique of a clean. And sometimes we'll do, this is clean technique, and you do that before you throw, just so that by the time she's doing that for a year or two, now she has really good technique and you can start to add weight. But they learn that they have to lift and they have to throw to get really good. I also think with a lot of this stuff too is like, get the kid to tell you what are they thinking about. What are they focusing on when they hear a cue from you? What do they think about? And in this case, with the middle schooler, it's always like, hey, do you think you could back squat a 45 on each side? Well, that's a good milestone. You set the milestone for the kid to work towards. Any other similar questions to that? Any other questions? Okay, thank you. I'll see you guys with the glide later.